My name is Andrew Carter, and I need to tell you something I never thought I'd say. For over 30 years, I was a pastor. I preached about faith salvation and the imminent return of Christ. I filled churches, counseled families, and witnessed people weeping at the altar, crying out for God's mercy. I always saw myself as a man of God, not just because I preached the word, but because I believed it with all my heart. I believed I was ready. And if there's one thing I've learned during my years of ministry, it's that most Christians believe they're ready too. But what if I told you that feeling saved means absolutely nothing? At the moment of death, I never feared the rapture. To me, it was the great day of reward for the righteous, the glorious moment when true followers of Christ would be taken to eternity, while the world faced judgment. But that fateful morning, something happened, something I never could have predicted, something that still wakes me up in a cold sweat with my heart racing. I saw the truth with my own eyes, and I'm not talking about a theological revelation or a controversial interpretation of a Bible verse. I died, I left my body, and what happened next shattered me. It all started suddenly. I was at home, resting after a long Sunday of preaching. The service had been powerful. People were moved, and I felt I had fulfilled my role once again. I made a cup of tea, sat down in my office chair, and started reviewing sermons for the coming week. I liked to plan every word, every argument, every Bible passage I would use to touch the congregation. Everything was in order. Everything seemed. That's when I felt a sharp pain in my chest. At first, I didn't pay much attention. I'd felt that before. I chalked it up to fatigue. I took a deep breath, rubbed the area, and tried to focus back on the notes in front of me. But then, the pain grew stronger. An overwhelming weight pressed down on my chest and my vision started to darken. I tried to call my wife, but no sound came out. It was as if something was pulling me down into a deep place, a place I couldn't escape. My body went numb. My heart felt like it was failing, and then everything stopped. There was no more pain, no ticking of the clock on the wall, nor the yellowish glow of the lamp beside me. I no longer felt my body, yet at the same time I was there. And what I saw in that moment made me realize that all the certainties I carried, everything I thought I knew about God, eternity, and the fate of souls, was about to be shattered before my eyes. When my eyes opened, I immediately knew something was wrong. But it wasn't a vague feeling, a premonition, or a strange dream. It was real, just as real as any other moment I had ever lived. Yet there was something I couldn't quite understand right away. Everything felt out of place, as if I were standing in the same spot, but also somewhere completely different. That's when I looked down. What I saw made my stomach turn. My body lay there collapsed beside the armchair where I used to pray, motionless, eyes half closed and lips parted, as if trying to say something before its final breath. My wife rushed into the office, her eyes wide and hands trembling. She called my name once, twice, 3 times, but I couldn't respond. I tried to move, tried to reach out for her hand, but there was nothing I could do. I was there, and yet I wasn't. Within minutes, I heard the sound of the ambulance. The paramedics burst in, laid my body on the floor, and began resuscitation procedures. One of them said something to the other, but their words sounded muffled, distant. It was as if I were hearing everything through an invisible barrier, as though the physical world was fading into a distant echo. My wife knelt beside me, holding my hand. I could see the despair on her face, her desperate pleas to God, her disbelief at what was happening. But none of that mattered anymore. It was then that I felt an indescribable force take hold of me. It wasn't something physical, like a hand pulling me or a strong wind pushing me. It felt like everything inside me was being lifted upward, as if gravity had reversed, and my soul was being drawn to another place. And Then it happened. Everything around me began to dissolve. The office, my home, the paramedics, my wife. It was as if the world was being pulled away from me. I didn't feel fear, but a profound sense of awe. As if, for the very first time in my life, I was truly confronting the unknown. Then came the light, a light so intense that for a moment I felt blinded. But it wasn't an ordinary light. It didn't shine like the sun or a lamp. It was a living light, pulsating and enveloping everything around it. And when I realized it, I was there. It was a vast place, impossible to capture in words. Although it seemed like endless space, there was a center, a focal point that commanded all attention. It was grand, imposing, and I knew, without anyone telling me, where I was. Before me was the throne of God. I had preached about this countless times. I had read about the great day of judgment. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for that. Then I realized something else. I was not alone. Around me were thousands, millions, a sea of people who appeared to have been gathered in the same place. Some wore expressions of ecstasy and joy, while others were pure terror, their eyes wide and faces twisted in despair. That's when I noticed something that made my heart stop. Many there were Christians, pastors, preachers, people who, like me, had devoted their lives to the church, the Bible, and the gospel. But there was something different about their faces, a mixture of dread and disbelief. They were waiting for something that had not yet happened. And then the voice came, a voice that could not be heard with the ears, but that resonated throughout my entire being, a voice that, the moment it spoke, made everything inside me tremble. The sound of that voice was unlike anything I had ever heard before. It wasn't just a voice. It was a call, a command, an absolute truth that pierced through everything I thought I knew. It was as if every cell in my body vibrated before it, as if every thought was exposed and every mask ripped away. Not everyone who says to me, "Lord, Lord," will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father. It was then that I saw clearly. I looked around at that endless crowd and realized something that made my heart sink. Many faces were familiar. Pastors, worship leaders, preachers of the word. Men and women who, in life, held spiritual authority and were revered by entire congregations. But now they were there, confused and terrified, as if they had just realized something terrible had happened. Then the screams started. "Lord, have we been faithful? Did we preach in your name? Did we heal the sick? Did we free the captives? How is it possible that we are here?" But there was no immediate answer, only silence. A deep, overwhelming silence that seemed to carry the weight of a judgment about to be pronounced. Fear began to grow inside me, like a tide rising rapidly. I had always taught about the rapture, always spoken about the separation between those who would be taken and those left behind. But at that moment, a thought I had never dared to consider pierced me like a sword. What if I was among them? It was then that he appeared. I can't fully describe his presence because any word would fall short of expressing what I felt. But I can say that the moment he appeared, everything changed. It wasn't just light. It wasn't just glory. It was the embodiment of truth itself. And before him, nothing could be concealed. His eyes scanned the crowd, and with each face he looked at, something happened. Some fell to their knees in worship, overcome with indescribable joy. Others began to weep in despair, and still others tried to argue, as if they could negotiate their position there. Then he spoke. The voice of Jesus was not that of a stern judge or an angry leader. It was a voice of truth, pure, undeniable, penetrating deep into the soul. Many of you believed you were ready. The silence that followed was unbearable. I felt my chest tighten, as if each word was piercing right through me. You learned about me, spoke about me, but did not live for me. There was a murmur among the crowd. Some bowed their heads, others looked indignant, as if they couldn't accept that verdict. Then he began to reveal, there are 3 types of Christians who will not enter the kingdom of heaven. The first revelation struck like a sudden blow. Those who lived in secret sin. Suddenly, before all of us, scenes from these people's lives began to play out. I saw men preaching from the pulpit, all the while secretly holding on to unconfessed vices. I saw women leading ministries, while harboring grudges and envy that had never been admitted. There were faithful people who attended church every Sunday, but in their private lives, they made room for everything they publicly condemned. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Those words echoed powerfully, and I saw many people drop to their knees, some trying to cover their eyes as if they could escape from it. But there was no way to flee. Then came the second revelation, those who sought me only out of self-interest. Again, images appeared, revealing the hearts of many present. I saw people crowding churches just waiting for material blessings. Men and women making vows and promises as if they could buy favors from God. Leaders who used the name of Christ to gain power, influence, and status. Did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not perform miracles? Did we not cast out demons? But then, the response came like thunder. I never knew you. The impact was devastating. Cries spread among those who realized too late they never had a true relationship with God. They used the name of Christ, but never truly belonged to Him. Finally, the last revelation came. Those who called me Lord, but did not obey my will. Those words struck like a final blow. I saw leaders who twisted the word to please the crowd. I saw Christians picking and choosing which parts of the Bible they wanted to follow and which parts they would ignore. I saw people justifying their wrongdoings, saying that God would understand, that He did not judge, that grace covered everything. But now, standing before Him, there were no more excuses. I was trembling. My heart raced. I couldn't think of anything but a terrible, overwhelming question pounding inside me like a hammer striking repeatedly. What if I were among them? When He looked at me, something inside me crumbled. It was as if the weight of eternity fell upon me all at once. Those eyes, more piercing than anything I had ever experienced, cut through my soul like sharp blades, revealing everything I had always tried to hide, even from myself. My heart stopped. My body, if I could still call it that, seemed to disintegrate in His presence. I knew. Even before He said a single word, I already knew. And then came the worst part. I didn't see a movie of my life flashing before my eyes, as many describe. No, it was far worse. I was forced to see the truth about myself, a truth I never had the courage to face in life. It felt as if every moment of my existence was being played out before me. But now, without illusions, without excuses, without the justifications I always gave myself, I found myself on the pulpit. I saw the packed services, people in tears, members raising their hands in worship. I saw my church growing, the pews full, the numbers increasing. I spoke about Christ's return, repentance, holiness. Then I saw something that made me tremble. I saw myself backstage after the services analyzing the offering numbers, thinking of strategies to keep the congregation engaged, worried about expanding the church's facilities, how to grow the ministry's influence. I saw the weariness in my eyes, a tiredness I never admitted to feeling. Because deep down, I no longer knelt in my room as I used to. I no longer spent hours in God's presence, without rush, without any hidden agenda. My time with Him had become just another item on the schedule, a ministerial duty. Then I heard His voice. Jonathan, you were busy preaching about me, but you weren't living for me. It felt like an earthquake within my soul, as if all the certainties I had were shattered by a single sentence. I tried to argue to justify my God. I have dedicated decades to the ministry. I left everything behind. I made sacrifices, suffered persecution, faced criticism. I carried the weight of shepherding a flock. How could that not be enough? But he just kept looking at me, and in that gaze was the whole answer. The truth hit me like a blow to the heart. I cared more about the ministry than about the master. I was more focused on the church than on the kingdom. I was more concerned with events, projects, and strategies than with the only thing that truly mattered, my relationship with him. Then, before my eyes, scenes began to unfold that I didn't want to see. People I had counseled, taught, who admired me, but who deep down needed a leader who lived what he preached. I saw church members who expected more from me than just words. They expected an example, but what they got was a pastor so preoccupied with his role that he failed to notice the hearts losing faith right before him. I saw myself in those moments when God was calling me for deeper intimacy, yearning for more time in his presence, and I would say I couldn't then, that I was busy, that I needed to solve a problem, plan an event, or organize a new project. And then I saw what I might have become if my life had taken a different path. I saw how I should have lived. I saw the version of myself who truly walked with God, who didn't just talk about him but actually knew him. The pain was unbearable. My God, I had spent my entire life preaching about you, yet didn't truly know you. And then, in a single instant, I realized what was happening. I was not ready for the rapture. Those words, the very ones I had so often spoken to others, now echoed inside me with an unbearable weight. I had spent my whole life thinking I was safe, believing it was impossible that I would be among those left behind. After all, I was a pastor. How could I not be ready? But now, there before him, before the absolute truth, I saw that everything I thought I knew meant nothing, because it wasn't my works that guaranteed my salvation. It wasn't the size of my church, nor the packed services. It wasn't the years in ministry. It was my communion with him, and I no longer had time to change that. The only thing that could save me was genuine repentance, but it was already too late. The despair that gripped me was beyond words. It was as if an abyss opened beneath my feet, and I was falling endlessly, with nothing to hold on to, nowhere to turn. I was lost in a way I never imagined possible. Lord, give me a second chance. Those words escaped my lips like a final breath, as if trying to grasp an invisible thread of hope before being completely swallowed. But deep down I already knew death was the end. There was no turning back. And then something happened. The silence around me shattered like glass. I felt a presence surrounding me, a force so intense it made my whole being tremble. I couldn't see him anymore, but I knew he was still there. It was then that I heard his voice. Watch and pray, for you do not know the day nor the hour. Those words were not just a Bible verse I had memorized. They weren't the kind of quotes you'd put up in a church service. They carried an indescribable weight, a warning that struck deep within me. It was an absolute raw truth, leaving no room for excuses. Then, in the next moment, I felt a sudden impact. It was like a lightning bolt hitting the center of my chest, a shock so intense it felt like I was being violently pulled backward, dragged into a place I couldn't see. Everything around me spun, and for a brief instant, I felt as if I were caught between two worlds. What had just happened was etched into my soul, yet something else was unfolding. Then the pain hit. My lungs burned. An enormous weight pressed down on me. My body felt crushed by an invisible force. The beeping of machines echoed in my ears. Muffled voices blended together, and I realized something was stuck in my throat. I tried to open my eyes, but the light was blinding. I blinked repeatedly, trying to figure out where I was. Then I heard a cry, a familiar one. My wife, he's awake. My God, he's back. Jonathan, can you hear me? I was back. I had no idea how much time had passed or what had happened to my body during that time. But I knew something had changed. I was no longer the same man who had collapsed lifeless in my living room that night. God had given me a second chance, but why? I stared at the hospital ceiling, feeling the weight of the moment. My mind was still trapped in what I had seen and experienced. The judgment, the despair of those who thought they were ready, the overwhelming truth about the state of the church, about my own state. And now I was here. But for what? That's when the answer came, like a quiet whisper deep inside me. An undeniable certainty. I couldn't keep living the way I had before. Something had to change. I had spent my whole life believing I was ready. I taught this to others. I preached sermons, wrote books, spoke to crowds. But now I knew the truth. Many evangelicals will not be raptured. I saw it. I heard it. I experienced it firsthand. And now, the only thing I could do was warn those who still had time, because that was the big question, wasn't it? Time? Who still had time to change? Who still had time to do things differently? Who still had time to break free from the illusion that just because they attend a church, just because they raise their hands in worship, just because they are part of a ministry, they are automatically guaranteed a place in the kingdom of God. I looked at my wife, who was still crying beside me, and I reached out to hold her hand with difficulty. She squeezed my fingers tightly, as if afraid I would disappear again. But I couldn't disappear. Not now, not before telling the world what I had seen. I am alive, I am here, I am breathing, but I will never be the same. Not a single day has passed since I returned without me remembering what I saw, what I heard, what I felt in that place where everything was revealed, where no mask could remain, where all human certainties turned to dust before the one truth that truly matters. I could try to forget. I could try to live as if nothing had happened, as if my life had been interrupted for just a few minutes, as if my death was nothing more than a passing event. But I can't. And do you know why? Because I came back for a reason. I came back to warn you. The greatest deception for Christians isn't out in the world. It's not found in the clearly sinful. The greatest deception is false security. How many times have I seen people inside the church trusting more in routine than in a transformed heart? How many times have I felt safe simply because I stood at the altar, because I held a title, because my words spoke of God every day? But Jesus doesn't want pretty words. He doesn't want empty gestures. He doesn't want temples filled with lukewarm hearts. He wants truth. And the truth is, not everyone will be taken. Not everyone who says, "Lord, Lord," will be welcomed. Not everyone who preaches about heaven will get there. Not everyone who raises their hands in worship truly knows who they are worshiping. And if you think this sounds harsh, if you think this doesn't apply to you, then listen carefully. I thought I was ready. I thought my place was guaranteed. I spent years believing that simply being a pastor, a leader, a man who dedicated his life to the gospel was enough for me to be taken on the big day. But I was wrong. And if I, who devoted every part of my life to God, realized too late that I wasn't ready, what about you? If the rapture were to happen today, right this very moment, are you absolutely sure you would be taken? Because if your answer is, "I think so," the real answer is no. So this is a warning for you. You can't live on assumptions. You can't base your life on what you do, what you show, or how you appear. The rapture isn't for those who think they're worthy. It's for those who live every day as if Christ could return at any moment. The question isn't how many times you've been to church this year. It's not about how many verses you've memorized. It's not whether you've been baptized if you participate in worship, or if you have a ministry. The real question is simple. Does Jesus know you? Don't be fooled. Time is running out. The clock of eternity doesn't wait. The separation between those who will be taken and those who will remain has already begun. And many who believe they were ready will realize they were living in an illusion. But there's still time to change. There's still time to humble yourself before God, seek His face, and live genuine faith. Without pretense, without religiosity, without deception. Now, I ask you, if the rapture happens today, are you sure you would be taken? Or would Jesus look into your eyes and say, "You're not ready"? It's not enough to just go to church or to call yourself evangelical. Jesus wants a surrendered heart and a life of obedience. Do you think all evangelicals will be taken in the rapture? Share your thoughts. Which of these 3 warnings impacted you the most? Let's talk about it. If this story made you think, watch this other video. Its revelation will shock you.